Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here at Tubby's, one of my favorite local establishments. They open at 4 o'clock, so not for lunch, but they have the most amazing hot dogs you can imagine, though I kind of like the baby nachos. All of that said, it's wonderful for Tubby's to invite us here. Thank you for having us. We're joined today here on Treaty 7 land in downtown Calgary, just at the eve of the Calgary Stampede. I'm joined by Kathleen Ganley, the MLA for Calgary Mountain View, as well as Hannah Anson, who will be talking a little bit about her life and her work for many, many years in the service industry. Earlier this month, we rolled out Alberta's Affordability Agenda, keeping money in your pocket. And it talks about a number of things that we're doing to try and reduce the cost of living crisis that Albertans are facing. Those include cutting electricity rates by 10%, reducing grocery prices, cutting the provincial gas tax, something that the government has continually failed to do, and making it easier for Albertans to buy their first homes. But also, Kathleen Ganley has been working for many months on a big part of our affordability agenda, and that's really around protecting service workers and young workers. And just a few days from now, we will have the opening of the greatest outdoor show on earth, the Calgary Stampede. I am proud to be an honorary life director of the Stampede. It is a wonderful thing for Calgary, but it happens because of a lot of young workers. It happens thanks to the hard work of a lot of servers and a lot of others. And we thought today would be a good day to talk about some of the things we'd like to do to protect the paychecks of those service workers. During Stampede, people from around the world come here and they experience incredible service and incredible hospitality. But in addition to having that draw of the Stampede, we have to make sure that the people that are working there are being treated fairly. Most of these workers are young. Many of them work several jobs to make ends meet, or they rely on their pay to save for school. But the UCP government is taking advantage of these workers. We've got the lowest minimum wage in the country. We have the highest youth unemployment wage rate in the country, one of the highest that we've seen in history. And we are very proud as Alberta's New Democrats to present a plan that helps these folks, that will create employment, that will ensure that people's paychecks are protected, and will ensure that the tips that you give, we all know that those little machines ask for more and more tips every single time, and many of us don't know that those tips don't always go to the servers that we think we're tipping. That's common sense. If you're making a tip for great service, the server, the person providing that service, should be able to get that tip. So joining me to talk a little bit more about how UCP inaction on wages and on tip protection has really hurt folks is Hannah Anson. Now, Hannah has spent years working for minimum wage. She is currently working 3 jobs, including as general manager of a Calgary bakery, restaurant, and catering company, and she is awesome. So Hannah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Naheed, and thank you for being here. For years, I've worked minimum wage jobs, and I believe it is disgraceful that Alberta continues to have the lowest minimum wage in the country. I pretty much always have had to work more than one job to meet my needs, the basic needs like rent, food, and being able to get to and from the jobs that I need to work. I'm fortunate now that I make above minimum wage, and it does make a real difference. I feel the benefits, and I feel appreciated. The owner I work for understands paying above minimum wage is good for business. Our employees know that they're valued, which makes for a better work environment, which leads to better service for customers, and we earn their loyalty. Even now, as I earn above minimum wage, I still know the importance of tips, especially on days when gas nears $2 a litre or a surprise bill pops up. That's why I'm disappointed Alberta doesn't have tip protection regulations in place. I and everyone who works for tip earns them. We should get to keep them. I've been in the service industry for a long time, and a lot of my friends have been too. There are definitely owners out there who are skimming off of their employees' tips, and that needs to stop. Because Alberta has the lowest minimum wage in the entire country, we rely on tips. It's money we've earned according to the customers who tip us for the service we've provided. And the customers expect that money to go into our pockets. I'm constantly surprising people I know when telling them that some owners do skim tips from their employees. So I was excited to hear about what the NDP is proposing. I believe these are changes and protections that we have needed for a very long time, changes that will make a difference with service workers and in this province as we too are dealing with an affordability crisis. Naheed and Kathleen, thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let you go there. Oh, you can come there. You come there. We can
I'll
dance.
go there.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hannah, and thanks for sharing your experience with us in this area. You and thousands of Alberta workers deserve better, and the Alberta NDP have a plan. Like many here in Alberta, I lived on minimum wage and tips for years. They paid my rent and they paid my tuition. I think that most Albertans expect that when they tip, that those tips are going to the frontline workers who are serving them, as many of us remember living on those same tips. Tip protection is about fairness. It's fairness to workers, but it's also to customers who think that the money that they are tipping is going to make someone's life just a little bit easier. So we are proposing to do exactly that. First, we would put in place tip protections to ensure that workers are keeping the tips that they earn. We would exclude managers and owners from tip pools unless they perform the same duties as staff. So a small business owner, for instance, who works in the kitchen would be entitled to share, but a manager wouldn't necessarily. Most provinces have already stepped up and passed similar legislation. Next, we would increase the minimum wage, $1 immediately, and an annual increase of $1 until we reach $18. Then after that, the minimum wage would be indexed to inflation to ensure that it keeps up with cost of living. An NDP government would also eliminate the youth minimum wage. We would close the loophole that allows young people to be paid $2 an hour less. That's $13 an hour, which is even lower still than our lowest minimum wage in the country. Can you imagine trying to save for university or college on those wages? This youth minimum wage was implemented by the UCP in 2019 and has done nothing to support youth unemployment. Quite to the contrary, Alberta has one of the highest youth unemployment in the country now as a result of this policy. Equal pay for equal work, it shouldn't be controversial. In developing the Alberta Affordability Agenda, we talked to the Chambers of Commerce, small business owners, and worked to understand the best approach. What business told us is what they need is time to plan for cost increases. We balanced that against the fact that this is urgent for workers, with many of them taking on multiple jobs and having to rely on food banks. While costs have ballooned, wages haven't kept up, and that means that many people are making the choice between food and rent. If this sounds familiar, it's because we introduced a bill, Bill 201, back in the fall, which included both these minimum wage changes and tip protections. We had also introduced a bill for tip protections the previous fall as well, which was also voted down. So the bill would have seen all of these measures included, but the UCP wasn't interested because they aren't interested in the thousands of Albertans struggling to make ends meet, who feel hopeless and like life will never get better for them, which is why we are coming forward with real practical solutions. And with that, I'd like to throw it back to Naheed.
Well, thanks, Kathleen, and thanks, Hannah. It's no surprise to anybody that Albertans are facing a cost of living crisis. We're seeing it in the price of groceries, we're seeing it in the price of gas, we're seeing it in the price of electricity, we're seeing it in the highest auto insurance rates in the country. The challenge is that we've had a government now for 7 years that has ignored the real economy, that has ignored the real impact of the lowest minimum wage in the country, of wage suppression, and of the ability for people to skim off tips from servers, which exacerbates and makes so much worse the cost of living crisis that everyone is facing. It's time to change that. It's time for practical, pragmatic approaches that really will make a difference for people. We know what these approaches are. They've worked in other jurisdictions, and we know that we cannot continue with a situation where the government ignores the fact that our youth unemployment rate is as high as it's ever been, or ignores the fact that there are unscrupulous owners who are taking tips away from the servers who the patron thinks are getting the tips. And let's remember that having the lowest minimum wage in the country, every other province in the country pegs minimum wage to inflation. The UCP chose not to do that 7 years ago. Had they done that 7 years ago, we wouldn't have had this problem. But because they've ignored this problem for 7 years, we now have both the lowest the lowest minimum wage in the country and the highest rate of youth unemployment. You know, your econ prof will tell you that increasing the minimum wage increases youth unemployment. But the UCP's negligence on this file, Premier Smith's ignoring of this problem, has meant that the basic economic rules are broken now. Our minimum wage is so low, and yet our unemployment is so high. And we've got to fix it. And we have to take pragmatic, predictable ways to fix that that keeps businesses whole. You know, I was just in Red Deer yesterday, and I stopped for a meal. And they brought the little machine, and the maximum tip on that machine was 20%. And the first thing I thought was, wow, you don't see a maximum tip of 20% very much anymore. And I think a lot of people, like me, think, well, if I tip generously, then this minimum wage server will at least have a little bit of money to make it to the end of the month. And many of us simply don't know that that money sometimes doesn't go to the server. So it's just common sense and fairness to put in this kind of legislation. All Albertans deserve an opportunity to share in our prosperity. And Alberta's New Democrats economic development plan, our jobs-driven economic plan, will create jobs, will create economic prosperity, and importantly, will share that prosperity with everyone. And folks can learn more about the Alberta Affordability Advantage plan at albertandp.ca/savemoney. Join us in our quest to make sure that we bring down the cost of living for everyone. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thanks, folks. We're going to start with questions here in the room, and just a reminder to the folks joining us to come up to the mic. For your question, please state your name and outlet.
Hi there, Mark Villani with CTV Calgary.
Hi, Mark.
Apologies, I have an off-topic question.
It's all right.
According to reporting from CBC, there's been a reimbursement policy in Alberta since 2011 for privately paid medical exams. That includes under your predecessor, Rachel Notley, who was Premier. In October, the UCP scrapped it and then reintroduced it, but called it a new policy. I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, you know, it's very clear that there was a mess here. Approximately 5 people per year got reimbursed for their private MRIs and their private x-rays. So there's some very open questions to who knew about this, who was benefiting from it, and who was being hurt by this policy. Now the UCP has brought in this terrible idea, which every expert says is a bad idea, allowing people to get early screening when there's no medical reason for it, and then maybe, just maybe, get reimbursed for that thousands of dollars if in fact something is found. And as always with this government and their healthcare policy, they're making it up as they go along. There's no guidelines, there's no restrictions, they're just kind of throwing it up in the air and hoping it works. And it's very clear that the old policy created by an old Conservative government was working so poorly that most people didn't even know it existed.
Was your party aware of this when the NDP was in government as well?
Now, of course, I wasn't there at the time, so that's a good question for Sarah Hoffman. But I understand, who was, of course, the health minister then, but I understand that nobody knew that this was going on except for the people that benefited from it.
And sorry, I just have another off topic. Can you also just to tell me just your thoughts on the Alberta Separatists getting a partial stay from the Court of Appeal, meaning that their signatures will now be counted for their petition?
Yeah, so I did I haven't read Justice Willey's judgment yet, but apparently what's happened is the Court of Appeal Judge Alice Willey, has suggested that the Elections Alberta can count the signatures, can verify them, but can't take any further action. Now, this is really interesting because, of course, the Premier didn't care about counting or verifying the signatures. When it comes to things she believes in, you just have to tell her you got the signatures and it's fine. Of course, when it comes to Corb Lund and all the hard workers on the Water Not Coal petition, every single I has to be dotted and every single T has to be crossed. This is hypocrisy and it is gaslighting. But I look forward personally to seeing if these signatures can be verified, because I'll remind people that we are, all Albertans were the victims of the largest data breach in Canadian history. and that the separatists had everything they needed to forge the signatures on that petition. So if Elections Alberta is counting and validating those signatures, I would expect them to do so with a very keen eye to make sure those were real.
All right, we're going to do one last pass for questions. All right, with that, that concludes our press conference. Thanks,
Great, thanks
folks.
very much.